What's going on, guys? Welcome in, welcome in. Get started here quick, just shortly. What a day. What a beautiful day. Let's see if I tag everyone again. Make sure I get everyone. But again, welcome in, guys. Kind of get started here. I know some more traders will pretty much just trickle in here just shortly. But what a phenomenal kind of day. El Lobo, what a day, my guy. Today was just it just felt like it's just so surreal watching that price action after FOMC statement just came out. But what a nice little slow beat we had. Gave you that buy the dip kind of opportunity. And so more so what was pretty much more telling to me was that, and this is pretty much, just using small little bits and pieces of indications of where, things are oversold, things look like they're bullish. One thing that pretty much stood out was obviously we saw the Tesla call flow that was pretty much coming in since last week. We saw the 950 calls. That kind of gave me the indication that Tesla was going to go. It was just a matter of time that was going to go. The other indication was also Facebook. We saw the 220, 225 calls on Facebook. Well, what do you know? We're already sitting at, what is this, 223. And I think that's just shy of a cloud alert that I'm actually working on for Facebook. So that was another one that was just a ripper. And then seeing the relative strength that it actually came back with Apple, which we haven't seen the past few days, right? We saw it roll over since its earnings. Seeing that relative strength now today, that was something. All right, are we going to get continuation and then push that 165 level? That's what we end up seeing today. And then on the back end of having a positive earnings from AMD, it just felt right at some point if the market was going to push, semis were going to go along with it. And then to pretty much fuel all of that was I was watching pretty much the weekly on Amazon, and we know that Amazon just collapsed basically off of their earnings. That was something else that caught my attention. We already had similar to what we had with Netflix. If you guys remember, I want to say about a few days, few weeks ago, if that may be the case, right? I was telling you to watch Netflix when we had a 6 day red streak. Well, in terms of Apple, we're pretty much pushing into a 6 week red streak, if that's the case, right? Better term, right? We already hit 1 week, two, three, four, five, and this was about to be 6 weeks that Amazon was about to pretty much continue its red mark. And so I was looking to see that pretty much snap. It hit my support level, pretty much in the lows of the morning hours. We smacked the low right around that 31 2380-ish mark is where I was particularly looking to find some reasonable support. And that was where I was particularly looking at for bottom. If you guys saw in chat, I was pretty much looking at the reversal. And then right after I posted the reversal in chat, we ended up having the rapid calls that came out on Amazon. So I was pretty much ahead of the party with that one in terms of the rapids coming out a little bit later on once I had already caught the reversal on the breakout. So that was just a beautiful one. So all of that combined just told me that the market was going to go. It was just going to be a matter of what point it was going to go. Whether we were going to drop off of FOMC today and then recover and rally into the end of the week, or like you saw today, it was just a face rip type of scenario. And that's basically what was adding up to me. So just pretty much putting pieces and bits together of what was bullish, where was the flow, where was key support levels, and so, what names were pretty much in oversold territory as you see Amazon with a 6 week red red mark. All right. So that was pretty much all the hindsight of everything that I was looking at in particular. And then as I pretty much draw into SPY that everyone wants to pretty much take a look at, going off of the daily here, we pretty much we saw that nice little I want to say a nice little doji action we had going on. We tried to make the higher low that we got out off of yesterday's price action, and where did we anchor? Right off of my zone that we had at that low that high 413 mark that we anchored off of intraday here in the morning, and you just saw that we pretty much just ripped off of that. Now where do we go from here off of pivoting off of that high 413 mark? Well, I'm looking at pretty much I expanded my wedge that we have for that broadening that megaphone action we had that we broke down from off of April 22nd. I'm looking at that support line that we broke off of from that megaphone is now going to act as a resistance. And so I'm looking to see if we end up tagging 431, low 431 roughly 431.28 is the spot I'm watching to see if we tag that as a resistance now. All right, and that's what I'm going to be looking at. If we end up pushing above that 431 spot, then I'm going to be looking at the confluence of we have the 50-day SMA in the yellow line there, and then we also have the anchored VWAP, which is sitting back from the highs what we had from March 29th, and that's just in confluence with 435, 436, in which that would be our upper range and continuation to the upside. All right. So 431, if we break 431, then I'm watching potentially up towards 436 as our high towards the 50-day SMA and our anchored view up from our most recent high of March 29th. All right. And that pretty much is simple put. Otherwise, excuse me. Otherwise, if we end up pulling back, we could still technically smack the 431 maybe pre-market or so and pulling back. But the level I'm watching on this pullback is pretty much 424 is what I'm looking at, kind of gives you about a quarter of the way back off of this daily candle that we had today. Otherwise, if we lose 424, then I have us coming back down towards 420 flat. And that'll be where we could potentially more so kind of give up more of almost all of today's price action. And then we're back right into a rut of what we were looking at going into FOMC. So that's basically the flip side up and down that I'm watching. 424, 420 to the downside. Upside, I'm watching 431 up towards 436 on the flip side. All right, and that's basically the ranges and what I'm looking at. Just pretty much reviewing some of the names that I've been pretty much putting on the watch list here that were on my radar, and that I've been swinging. This is one that was just beautiful. I gave you guys Salesforce. That was a textbook inverted head and shoulders action I was watching. Obviously, you saw it kind of flashed like it was gonna break down off of the inverted head and shoulders and invalidate the pattern. No, it actually ended up holding that support line. It held that 175 half, and that was literally about a $10 move from the bottom to the top of the break over the neckline. Continuation will pretty much put you at that 50 SMA here at that 191.24 spot. I think my target in particular was roughly around the 190. So we'll likely see that SMA kind of close in as we get it pushed likely tomorrow. All right. So this is one that I love this particular trade. I believe, do they have earnings coming up? No, they don't. But yeah, it was just pretty much just the pattern I was watching on this one. All right. So that was just textbook. Hopefully you guys caught that one. I dropped in ideas, and that was just a textbook pattern that was playing out. The other one I was watching was also Walmart. This is one that I was keeping an eye on. I dropped this chart. If I pretty much just expand the resistance line, kind of feels a little crooked here. But if you notice, more defined thing is that we ended up breaking the downtrend resistance today. We held the body of the candle held today off of the last 2 hour candle that we had. It held that 152.40 spot, and we had the beautiful push right over the downtrend resistance. And we pretty much went right into, I believe that's the 100-day SMA that we pretty much smacked right into resistance at with a mark of 154.80. So if we break that 154.80 tomorrow, then you're looking at upside to 155.86. And my overall PT on Walmart was 157 is what I'm watching. So if you're looking at this one, if you're able to break that 154.80 spot tomorrow, I think you look at 157 calls going out to next week. And that'll be a beautiful move that you can pivot off of in terms of a swing. All right. So that one's beautiful. Other than that, Facebook was just a rip. I know that the algo that I'm actually working on that's currently in testing right now, it has it hitting a PT of about 224.30, if I remember the exact number. That's what I'll be watching for. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at testing the gap fill here pretty soon at that 228 mark, and that'll be something that'll get quite interesting. But I think 224.30 would be the top, in which that would be my potential target right now off of the algo that I'm working on. All right. Alobo, you said to look at UPST. I'll take a peep. What'd you say about Amazon? Amazon made you cry. It is what it is. I sold Amazon pretty early, to be honest with you. And given the fact that I literally bought the absolute almost bottom on Amazon today, and I still sold it early, because obviously when you get into such volatility, and this is where I ended up saying on live that even though I wasn't sweating about the price action once we had the FOMC statement, because I was holding an Amazon call spread during that FOMC statement, and I just saw it flip back red and green, is that I was not destroyed by data basically. That was the good part about that, especially when you're in these high flyer names. And that's why I was a little bit more confident in terms of holding that through FOMC. But did I expect us to get that kind of extended rally on Amazon? No, I think I sold it when it was still down about $20, and guess what? It went green and it was up $30 at one point. So that, I mean, yeah, it's painful, but as long as you get the right entry and you sell for profits, I think that's the bigger picture where you can't be mad at yourself for that. All right. But pretty much looking at UPST, this was a hell of a reversal. I thought someone was saying this was pretty much bleeding, but I gotta say that's a hell of a reversal. A nice little reverse off of this. They do have earnings coming up on the 10th, which would be next week. So where can we potentially look to range up towards is where I would assume that you're looking at, and this would be the range that I would particularly look at in terms of UPST here. This would be my particular range that I'm watching. So we could see this start to pretty much extend. I'll be watching this towards 97.80 is the spot I'm watching. And high end of that, if we start to really push right into those earnings, then you're looking at pretty much tapping the 100 mark. So if I was to be realistic with you, I think for this week, if you're trying to play it out for this week, then you're looking for those 95 calls in particular, just throwing a solid number out there that can go in the money. 95 calls, and you're looking to pretty much take a target here towards that 97.80. Otherwise, if you do have the capital, then I would say you look out towards 100 calls next week, maybe even make it a call debit spread, and you can take this up towards 100 next week, into right into their earnings, and you can take the profits before they report. All right, and that's basically the two ways that I will play it. So either 95 strike this week, you play that, you can play that into a call debit spread, or you stretch it out towards next week, see if it makes that move up towards 100, and you make another call debit spread out that direction. And that's just to mitigate the volatility that maybe we get some kind of flip side off of FOMC going into tomorrow. All right, and that's why I would just suggest a call debit spread instead of just a regular naked call. All right, but that's definitely a beautiful one. I like that one in particular. Kimondio, you said Bill. I've heard some flow on this one recently, but I have not looked at it to be honest with you. First things first, let's see if we have actually broken our downtrend resistance, which I don't think we particularly have. Let's see if we can get a nice little downtrend resistance in particular. So this will be the downtrend resistance that we're pretty much watching off of Bill here. I'm just gonna try and expand the chart for you so you can get a better look. So what you're basically looking at is you're looking to pretty much get over this 2-hour 50 SMA right here. You're looking to pretty much break over 179.95. Pretty much ballpark number 180 is where you want to look to pretty much break out of. You break that mark of 180, and then you're potentially looking at taking this up towards 188 and a quarter is where you're potentially looking at towards your downtrend resistance. And that would be the spot where you're going to end up deciding if you end up getting in on the break over 180 and you're pretty much sitting at 189, are you going to end up trying to lock in profits and then let your runners pretty much dictate if you break over the resistance, or if you pretty much end up taking all of your profits at that 189 spot right into the downward trend resistance, in which you don't want to pretty much risk it, the rejection, and then losing profits. So that's pretty much the way I would say it. All depends how much the premiums are, how much contracts you're potentially looking to buy. But if you're looking to pretty much just play maybe one contract, then you're looking to pretty much ideally, I would say you look for the break over the 180 spot, you ride that up to 189, and then you look to take your profits at the 189 spot, risking the fact that you don't break out of the downtrend resistance. Otherwise, if you have runners, then you take profits and you let the runners dictate whether you break the downtrend resistance or not. All right. Randy, let me see. Big question is, will we get a pullback tomorrow morning before going higher overall? Pretty much everything ran a little too well at end of day. And Randy, that was exactly what I think Avery was trying to pretty much determine himself right now. And that's why I say there's if, ands, and buts about it, as I pretty much flash back towards my SPY chart. Is that honestly, and this is pretty much my projection, obviously, I gave you my targets up and down. 424, 420 to the downside, 431, 436 to the upside. But what I'm particularly looking at, and this is why I say depending on structurally, I'm actually extending the support level that we have that we broke down off of the megaphone action that we had. If you see the two blue lines, that creates a nice little megaphone action. And you saw that we broke down off of that megaphone from April 22nd. What I'm expecting is that we tap this as a resistance here at this 431 spot, and that's gonna likely be our downfall right back towards 424, and potentially if we, depending on market sentiment, all right, then it's likely that we pretty much extend that down towards 420 if we start to get really heavy and the selling pressure adds up. All right. But otherwise, 424 would be ideally your buy the dip spot, Randy. That's what I would potentially be watching for. All right. Kemandio, that's what I was actually gonna say too. That's why I was kind of a little bit more hesitant to say that, if you are spending up, likely it being maybe one contract with how expensive they are, you look to take your profits at your downtrend resistance rather than trying to risk the premium. That's what I was trying to maybe say in essence, because I know that the bill, granted the fact of how much that stock is, and I believe the liquidity is pretty low on that ticker also. So just be mindful of that as well with it, how low the liquidity is. That's something that you want to be concerned about. But I was potentially saying that you look to take your profits roughly at this 188 spot and maybe not risk trying to get over the downtrend resistance. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, you get over the downtrend resistance, then you're looking at 205 as you're pretty much going to smack the SMA on the daily here. The 50 SMA at 205. Looking at the Qs, also hit that 230 level. I hope we really get a pullback, but bull market again, hopefully. I'll be honest with you. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. To be honest with you, is that I don't think that we're necessarily in a bull market again. And this is where you've seen this a lot of times in this market in the past. I want to say since practically the beginning of the year, right? This has been more so of a market where you short the rips rather than you buy the dips. And that, I mean, obviously today was one of those rare occasions because obviously you had a volatility event. But this market has been more so a short the rip rather than a buy the dip kind of scenario, if you've noticed that since the beginning of the year. And granted the fact that we already, obviously, we got what we expected out of the market from the Feds. We got the 50 basis points, but the market's going to be looking for more because they're not going to be basically looking at the fact that a 50 basis point is going to be enough for this market to pretty much overcome what we stand at with the challenges that we stand at. So the market is going to be looking for more than 50 basis points on the next rate hike, and that's what's now going to start to becoming in focus here. And that's where I think is likely going to be potentially more so of a downfall amongst other things that maybe be surrounding factors, right? But I don't necessarily think that this is really going to be something that's going to sustain pretty much being a full on bull market, quote unquote. All right. So I do think that there's a little bit more pain ahead, honestly. I think that we're going to see some downfall. I still think personally that we're going to end up tapping that SPY gap fill. That's likely, I think, roughly around that 403 mark on SPY. I still think that's coming. So whether it be within the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month, that all depends. But I don't think this is a bull rally that's going to sustain, if that's a better term to say for you. All right, Randy. But other than that, I think shortlist is pretty small right now. You can make pretty much a case here, and I did not even know that Tesla actually smacked right into my zone, and I think I had this on the watch list at some point this week. Smacked right into my resistance at 952. As you saw, I never even changed that zone. Literally smacked right into it. We hit the 100-day SMA on Tesla as well at 957. And if you also notice, we had some back-to-back Nibis puts on Tesla. We had back-to-back ARC puts on as well. That all hit this afternoon. So what that kind of tells me as well is that we likely hit some short-term resistance on Tesla, or right at this 100 SMA right now off of the daily from that 957 mark in which we regressed. So that's something that's also going to catch my attention going into tomorrow. This might actually end up being a pretty fire short going into tomorrow. If you pretty much get Tesla here right back under this 932 mark, we see Tesla pretty much regress under 932. I think that's going to be a beautiful short right back down, and we could start to pretty much range this all the way back down towards 903 and potentially smacking 900 on the dot. All right. So that's pretty much like looking at SMAs, pretty much the spots in where we just, it felt like an overextended rally, but a lot of different names smacked right into resistance. Another one that smacked into resistance, I was watching, and you saw me post that idea on Apple. It went a little bit over my target, but I was watching the 50-day SMA on Apple here. We smacked that at 155, 165.50, and we kind of wicked right over it here, right? Then when I switched over to the 4 hour, it kind of looks like we have a little bit more in which we can extend this push before we get the downfall. And we could see this extended Likely a gap up towards 166.94, and that might be in the same breath of where I was expecting SPY to likely tap up towards 431 tomorrow morning. So that could be the scenario in which we get a nice little gap up tomorrow morning, and what I'm expecting is a nice fade through the day. That's pretty much what I'm kind of seeing here going into tomorrow. Tapping that 431 pre-market, and then we likely fade to the rest of the day in which we get our nice slow pullback towards SPY 424, potentially 420 if selling pressure really starts to fuel. All right. But that's kind of my gist of everything I was watching. Something that's going to be also on watch tomorrow is going to be Shop earnings tomorrow. I saw they smacked 420 puts on Shop. That was an unusual put. I thought it was actually just a regular unusual put that they just smacked, but it was actually a catalyst. We have earnings tomorrow morning, so that might be something I'll watch to see how the broader market kind of responds to that. Maybe Amazon, in pretty much in sympathy to that. We'll see how Amazon ends up reacting to that as well. All right. Unexpected inverse options flow. Here's the thing: when you have catalysts like today, and this is pretty much you heard Sig really saying it. I think he even, I mean, he said it multiple times. I think before FOMC statement came out, flow was very mixed, and I was also seeing the same thing. But what I was watching was, and this is pretty much everyone was like, I think someone asked me, how did I know where support was on SPY here today? Once FOMC statement came out, and what I was basically looking at was a reflexive movement, basically, right? I already know where my zone was. I had that 413 high, 413 and 3/4 here. I already had that plotted out. You already see that I had the 200 SMA here off of SPY on the 5 minute. And what we basically created was you had lower highs off of the FOMC statement, you had lower lows. And so what I was watching to see is either I was going to hold the 200-day SMA here at 414 half, or we were going to end up holding support at the 413 and 80 mark is what I was watching. And that's where I was expecting, since Powell had not spoken quite yet, I was expecting him to say something that would pretty much give us a better guidance and soften the cushion of where inflation was, and giving us, he gave us the term that we wanted. He pretty much said that we were going to get a potential soft landing on the back end of inflation here, basically, is what he kind of pretty much said to the market. What did that do to the market? It gave them a sigh of relief, and that's what gave you that sporadic movement off of making lower highs, lower lows, watching two support levels I had anchored off of, and that just gave us that beautiful face rip, right? And so I already had my levels already set. Watching that 420 mark, we blew past that beautifully. That was the level that you wanted to explode off of. Then watching the next mark, 423 and 75, blew right past that. And then and my last PT I had there was around that 427 half. That's where I was expecting to smack resistance and maybe get continuation tomorrow. But then at this point, once we broke that 427 half, then I was like, I mean, they might as well just put it at 431 into the close. But granted, the fact they just stopped us just shy, that's what I'm saying. It's likely we get a gap up tomorrow morning, and then it's likely going to end up being a fade kind of day where we get a nice. That'll be our form of a pullback. All right. But that's basically what I was watching in terms of that. Flow was not really necessarily helping at all, I think, honestly. And with Catalyst, when you have like this, especially like earnings, you don't look necessarily at earnings per se for flow, right? I mean, it's same thing with with FOMC. Do not rely on flow to really tell you the direction to move. All right. UPST is expected to disappoint on earnings, so I'm careful not to hold past earnings. Transitory, I know that I was saying, and that's why I was mentioning that it has a potential to get a beautiful run up in breaking the downtrend that someone actually had me just chart just a few minutes ago, right? I was watching UPST. I said there's either two ways you likely play this out. Either you're looking to pretty much play the 95 calls this week. It's likely going to smack the 97 target I was watching this week. Otherwise, maybe we see it extend a rally into the earnings, and it likely smacks $100 before crashing back down to earth. All right. So 95 calls, you look to get it out towards 97 this week. Otherwise, you play it out towards next week into the earnings if you have the capital. I know premiums are going to be expensive. You play it out towards $100 next week. We likely see a strong run up in continuation. And once it ends up hitting that 100 mark into the earnings, we'll likely see it come crashing back down. That's literally the scenario in which I'm looking at in particular with UPST. All right. But other than that, that kind of wraps up everything I was watching. Hopefully, everything that you guys requested. So I'll leave it at that. But tomorrow again, I'm hoping that we get a beautiful pullback. I think that's really what I'm expecting. That strength out of Apple, the movement out of Apple and Microsoft, and then the fact that we're pretty much sitting right at an SMA resistance with Tesla. Amazon went right into resistance. It feels like we get a strong pullback tomorrow, and that's what I'll be watching for. And then we'll have to decide whether that's going to be a buy the dip opportunity tomorrow, or if we end up pretty much getting, today was just a fluke for that matter. And that's basically what it's going to tell us tomorrow. So potentially 424, 420 is what my downside targets are looking into tomorrow. All right. Mr. Seriously, Nvidia's chart looks horrible. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I was not fairly bullish on Nvidia. Obviously, it ran because of the broader market. I was not particularly bullish on this. If you look at the daily chart, I still have this coming down to 179. That's the level that I'm particularly watching. So I don't expect it. I know that AMD went right into resistance, and that's another thing is that I don't expect AMD to necessarily go past to run past 100 like this. I think it ran right into resistance. As I was saying, a lot of names ran into resistance. I don't necessarily think that AMD is going to go much further than this. And so I would expect that to get a pullback with NVIDIA. So if you're in NVIDIA calls, I would kind of caution about that. I don't expect this to really get much more upside. You could hit some resistance around 208 if you get continuation, but that to me is a big if. But 208 would be my resistance spot. If you are in calls, we do see continuation pretty much in the broader market, semis included, then that would be your upside target, in which I would be saying is where you're potentially looking at. All right. But other than that, I'll call it a wrap. Should have gone to Apple and SPY instead. Wish it woulda, coulda. I mean, I wish I would have held Amazon all the way down from the bottom, down $100 to up $30, but that's life, right? You just pretty much you pick your spots, you look for your profits, and you cash out. That's pretty much the biggest goal in this market right now. All right. But I'll leave it as is. We'll keep it a wrap right there. But other than that, appreciate you guys joining. Hell of a day what we had. Let's see what tomorrow brings us, and I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning. All right. But other than that, I'm out.